Hi guys, James here. I produce and DJ under the name Made by Pete. I'm going to do a breakdown track with you today. I'm going to discuss some of the decisions I've made, some of the sounds I've used. I'll pull out some of the key sounds and discuss how I made them. And we'll also go through a little bit of mixing and some arrangement ideas as well. Just as sort of a disclaimer, I know you can see quite a lot of outboard equipment and instruments and stuff. You won't need them to follow along. I will be using them, but this is more of a workflow thing for me. I think that the hardware is more, it makes it more fun, more interesting for me in the studio to use this stuff. But if you haven't got all of this stuff, then don't feel that you won't be able to follow along. You can do it all inside of the DAW as well. Thanks to the BMC for inviting me to do this. I hope you find it interesting, and let's crack on. So I'll just put my cans on so I can hear what I'm doing. I'm going to be working inside Logic today. It's a DAW that I use. I've used it ever since I started making music, and it just works really well for me. So the first thing that you'll see here is on the finished track is hopefully how neat and tidy it looks with all the different colours. I like to really sort of be able to visualize my arrangements, and I think it really helps me to put all of the elements in groups and color them just so I can visually understand what's going on. It's easy to get lost in a track when you've got lots of things going on, lots of automation and stuff. So these kind of visual cues really help you just to keep on top of things. So I'm going to start here with the top end, and we'll just have a quick listen to the top end. In fact, before we do, I'll have a quick play of the track so you can hear what kind of vibe it is. I guess you would describe it as deep breaks. Okay, so that's the track we're working on today, and let's have a look at the top end. I'm going to start with the tonal snare because, funnily enough, this sound was the sound that inspired me to make this track. It doesn't always take a lot to spark an idea, but I've been listening to a couple of sort of tracks from the likes of Orbital and and some other sort of deep kind of breaky stuff, and I had the idea that I wanted to try and make something like that, and I was working on another track, and I was flicking through samples actually, and I came across this snare, which just had a great little tone in it, and I thought, that's the perfect snare to form the base of my breakbeat, so to speak. So that's the first point of call. And let's just go through these one by one. So there's a live fill here, which is coming in at the end of every bar. It's not the same fill. It's so every other fill is different. So it adds some variation to the track. And then there's another fill here, which is in every bar, but it's just a little roller. Tambourines at the top, and processing wise they've just got some tremolo on them, which is just sending them left and right and just adding some pan in there. Knocked the mic, sorry. High bell here. Now this has come from my Nord Drum 3P, which is a percussion synthesizer, which is just really great for the top end. It really cuts through, and it's got some nice tones in it. So we've got a little bit of noise in there as well, just to add some texture. So that's kind of sort of cutting through the mix. I've got it panned to the right, just so it's sort of, again, spreading out the stereo field. And here we've got an atmosphere loop. I like using atmosphere loops a lot as sort of sound beds. They don't, the sound doesn't always cut through in the mix and not necessarily hear it, but it adds a vibe to it, especially if you can compress it and treat it within another group of elements, whether that is a kind of group of pads or in this instance a group of drums. It sort of blends itself into all the other elements and it adds a certain vibe to the whole group. Okay, so this is named as a clave, but obviously it's quite low, so I guess it's a bit more of a rim shot, really. And those are the ride hats, so I think I just chopped those up, really. I think that was from a sample loop, and I just chopped them up and sort of repositioned them a bit. And I like the tone of them. I think they really they add a good sense of tone and strength to the top end. They're a bit dirty, they're a bit saturated, and they're not sort of too bright, but they're filling out certain parts of the frequency spectrum. So if we listen to the top end group together, and what I'm kind of hearing is I'm getting some nice, really sharp top end, the one that's going to cut through the mix, but also there's some body in there and there's some depth in the sounds, and I think that's what is one of the most important things you can do when you're building your sounds and your loops, is to really focus on individual sounds. How much are they adding to it? It's so easy to stack up layers and layers and layers of loops and to go, well, yeah, that sounds good, but when you sort of strip it back, you want to be looking for 5 or 6 real core sounds that are bringing everything to the table, and have a few supporting sounds around them. But ask yourself, am I really sort of filling the frequency spectrum here? And are the key sounds that I really want to jump out, are they doing themselves justice? Have they got enough body and weight to them that they're going to cut through and they're going to sound interesting in your mix? So after the top end, we're going to look at here the congas. This is a sort of percussion loop, and I've kind of separated these from the rest of the drums because I wanted to treat them separately. I wanted them quite sort of up front in the mix. Okay, so I'll talk you through some of the processing that I've done here. It's not dramatic. I think, again, it's about choosing your core sounds and making sure the sound is right to start with. In some very rare instances, I might be looking to completely change the timbre of a sound and really, really sort of rework it. But in most cases, I'm working hard to find the really, really correct sound that I want to use. And then when I'm processing it, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to enhance it slightly, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm fitting it into the mix and making sure that it's working in its balance with the other sounds that I'm choosing. So I've got let's start with the first on here, which is just going to be an EQ, I think. Yeah, so just rolling off some of the low end and just reducing a couple of peaks here, which is a couple of resonances that I've picked out. Very simple stuff. Next in the line is the transient designer. I use transient designers a lot, but having said that, I haven't used this, so I think this was on the track for another reason, and I didn't end up using it. But transient designers are a great tool, especially if you're working with audio a lot, because you can either increase the attack, and get more punch on your sounds, or increase and decrease the sustain. I find that I use them a lot to decrease the sustain. If you've got like a drum loop that's got lots of wide elements to it, you can use a transient designer to shave off all those tails and just get the really sort of sharp transients and really shorten it and tighten up a drum loop, and then open out the sustain with automation later on, and you can you can get some really great effects using that. Sample delay is something that I've used a lot, and you have to be careful the way you use it, because it can sort of mess with your stereo image and a bit of phasing as well. But essentially what it's doing, if I turn it off and you listen to the drum loop here, and I turn it on, so if you're listening to that in good headphones or on speakers, then you'll hear that the stereo image suddenly gets a lot wider. And all I'm doing is delaying the left and right signal, in this instance by 400 milliseconds, or 400 samples, sorry. And that because it's a very, very small distance between the left and right, you're getting that enhanced stereo width. I find it works really well on percussion instruments. If you can use it sparingly, again, I try and use it maybe once or twice in my tracks on some elements that I really want to pop out. And in this instance, I wanted those congas to really pop out, so the sample delay is on there. I'm just having a quick look through these to see if there's any sort of interesting processing that I should be talking about here, but I really don't think there are on the individual hits. The high bell that we looked at earlier, which came from the North, excuse me, it's got a stereo delay on it, which is just adding a little bit more energy to it, and again spreading that width left and right. But when it comes to grooves and drums, most of my processing ends up on the drum buses, which we'll discuss later when we talk about mixing. So let's move on to the kick for now. As you can see here, that I've got 3 kicks. One of them is muted out. So I've auditioned quite a lot of kicks for this. Obviously, in dance music, your kick drum, it carries the track, it drives the track forward. So it's really important to get your kick drum right. In this instance, I think my main kick drum here is quite of a boomy kick drum, but because I'm using a breakbeat and the track has quite a live feel to it, I wanted to get an acoustic kick in there as well. And kick 2 was an alternate to kick 1. Again, it's got quite a lot of character in there and noise, but in the end I've gone with kick 1. So the acoustic kick itself, I'm rolling off some of the lows here, just up to 28 hertz, and then I'm removing a little bit of mid here. And that's just layering with my main kick drum to create the full kick. And if you listen to that, and you can see on my EQ there, and that's just the kick and the drums. But what I was talking about getting everything that you want in the frequency spectrum, and sort of all my drums there are really sort of everything's got its place in the spectrum, and I'm filling out certain frequencies. Obviously, we've got a lot more sounds to add, so we want to make sure that we're not doing too much and we're not taking over the whole frequency spectrum. We need to allow space for other elements as well. But when I hear that drum groove, I want to feel gratified, and I want to feel like everything's being hit in the right place. Okay, we're going to move on to some synths and some other parts now. I'm going to leave the bass for later because the basses were made on the Novation Peak and on the Sub 37 from the Moog Sub 37. So I will do those later, and we'll move the camera around, and I'll give you a good look at the instruments and how they work, and we'll talk about how I made those sounds. I'm going to go with this pad here. Now this pad, we'll have a listen to it on its own. He says on its own. Okay, so this is a sample that I found. The original sample, I believe, was much higher pitched. So I saturated it and pitched it down and put it into a sampler, and was to be able to create this sort of flowing mellow pad. And I think that's a cool thing to try, pitching things down, especially synths that are in the higher ranges. You're listening, you can hear there's a lot of noise in that, and I think it adds to the character, and there's a lot of movement in it, and I think you can get that a lot when you pitch elements down. You can really turn sounds into sort of what they were, maybe a little bit feeble, and you can, with a little bit of extra saturation and another EQing, you can really bring sounds to life. And this sound definitely carries the groove and carries the sort of the mids and the tops. It's got a lot of texture to it. If I put on further back in the track here, there's another track here, which is the filter texture. And this is what I'm talking about, of sort of really trying to make sure the sounds are right to start with, but then also using EQs to really balance them in the mix. So in listening to that track in isolation, it actually sounds better without its EQ. If I take the EQ off, but in here, I'm just rolling off the bottom end and just taking out a couple of resonances, because once all the other elements are added back in order for it to fit in better, it benefits from having those frequencies removed. So that's how you have to consider things, is like get them in place and then really listen to how they work and how they balance with the other parts and the other elements in your track. These were recorded from the Nord Drum 3P again. They're sort of little percussion hits, and while I was hitting it, I was sort of adjusting the pitch, and they sort of bend and plop in and out of nowhere. So they're just little interesting effects that happen in the background and sort of roll on throughout the track. Okay, getting on to the breakdown here, and one of the core elements of the track, which is the guitar, and this is, I'll play you a sample of it and then I'll talk about it. Okay, so this is a recording that I got from a session musician, and it was a fantastic, very talented guy, did a brilliant take. And I've sort of chopped out the guitar and used parts of it in the breakdown and also later on in the track. Some quite drastic EQing going on here. So a low cut and then quite a large boost in the sort of in between the 1 and 2K range. I think this is really just to, it's all about how it's sitting with my textures and the other parts that are going along here. It's about where I really wanted the guitar to stand out, and I think it is around this sort of heading towards the top end, but not quite, sort of the upper mids here that I really wanted to bring it out. And some sort of quite drastic cuts here where some of the movements on the fretboard with the finger were just sort of, you know, they were getting a little bit too peaky there. After that, I've just got a compressor. It's just, you know, it's a live performance, this. So as you can see from the audio file, you see there's lots of sort of peaks and quite drastic dynamic ranges. So this compressor here is it's coming in. It's got a fast attack and there's sort of a medium release and a soft knee here. And I'm just trying to control some of those peaks to give myself a little bit more of a balanced level throughout the performance, especially when the lower parts, I want to be able to bring those up and I want them to be audible. So I'm using that compressor to then reduce the louder parts so they're not peaking and they're not getting in the way. After that, we've got a effect rack from Sound Toys. Obviously, Sound Toys are very well known software creator. They make some fantastic effects, and I use them all the time. So this is a preset in the effect rack, which I just liked. I think it works quite well. It adds a reverb. It's subtle, but it does something nice. It adds a little bit more vibe and a bit more ambience to it, which is what I want from this part of the track here. This is the breakdown, really, so I really am looking for vibes here. We've got this filter texture here, which you can hear starts to go a bit crazy. And this is the filter freak that just starts dialing in. And you can kind of hear that it's distorting as well, but I quite like that. It's certainly supposed to be a bit weird and a bit wonky.
I wanna tell you what I've got to say to you. I wanna take you into my arms. Free my soul.
Let's take a look at this chopped vocal, because this is something that was made from an a cappella that I found and a sample that I used. So I'll show you how I made this with a tool that I've been using for quite some time now, but it's really, really cool. It's called Cycles, and it's a contact instrument from Slate and Ash. It's basically a sort of a sample bangler, so you can it comes with loads of presets, and you can import your own sounds as well as use the sounds that they provide, and there's some brilliant sounds in there. But how to make it your own is obviously to use your own sounds or samples or do your own thing with it. So if I find the file here, okay, so if I just play this.
House is represented worldwide by DJs like Tony Humphries, Junior Vasquez, Frankie Knuckles.
A very famous Masters at Work vocal there, which obviously you can't get away with using because it's, you can't just sample other people's work like that. So what we're going to do here is just drag it in. Oops, open it up again. It's a little bit slow on the CPU. It's going to load. The chipmunks. So that's pitched up quite hard. Open this again. And this is a great great VST. It basically has a load of presets which just does amazing things to audio. So you can start with, you can either go in the loops or you can go with grains. So in the loop section, you can start messing with the signal and the pitch and the speed of it. And you can adjust things like panning and octaves and fifths. And you can adjust the playhead, whether it's going forward or backwards. So there are lots of great things you can do with it. And also in the grains here, you can sort of start creating, sort of turning vocals into pads, and it's kind of granular synthesis. So it breaks all the audio down into small parts and then loops them and plays them back. And I'll just skip through a couple more of the presets. So this is kind of, I think, how I started with doing what I did and to get the sound that I got. So it's got that sort of tremolo effect on it, which is chopping it in and out, and then you're moving the position of the sample. But it just shows you that, from a well-known vocal sample, if you spend some time playing with it and doing some things, that you can chop it up and make it into something that's sort of unrecognizable and something that you can use in your tracks. Okay, so moving over to the Moog Sub 37 now. This is a analog synthesizer. It's a mono synth, and it's fantastic for sort of rich low-end tones, which I have used it for in this track. And I've also used it sort of as a top end line as well, quite an ambient line. I'll just play this line to you now, and then we'll work out how to make that from scratch. Okay, so it's very ambient, it's very floaty, and it's characterized mainly by the sort of the soft attack and the glide between the two notes. So I'm just going to initialize the Sub 37. And we get that initialize sound. So in order to start off with this, I'm going to just pitch up and look in the higher end. I'm going to start by bringing the cutoff filter down. I'm going to make sure I'm on a triangle wave, so I want those smooth tones. Okay, let's start with the amplitude envelope. So I want to have a softer attack. I want to get rid of that click at the end with the release. So I'm just sort of shaping the sound at the moment. Okay, let's add a little bit of filter modulation in here. So I'm just going to send the filter to the envelopes. I'm just going to shorten the attack. Okay. Okay, so what I was saying before is the characteristic here is the glide here. So if you've got this the glide between notes, and I can just adjust the time of how much glide there is. Which is obviously a little bit extreme, but we're going to try and go somewhere. A little bit more harmonics, just change the waveform slightly towards a bit more of a square. With a little bit more character. Slightly less filter modulation. A little bit of resonance. Okay, now we're sounding like it. And when I'm playing this, I'm being careful to overlap the notes. You see, sometimes if I don't, I get the sharp sort of transient filter at the beginning, which I don't really want. In fact, when I recorded this, I sequenced it from Logic because it's easier to overlap those MIDI notes. So I set up a sequence in Logic, just those 3 notes, looped it in MIDI, and hit record. And then I was adjusting the filter, and I was adjusting the resonance to sort of make it flow through the track, and just did one long recording, and that's how we got that sound. The next Moog sound is a little bit more of a classic Moog sound, which is a lower end tone. I'll play you that. Okay, so that's just a very characteristic Moog sound. Sub 37 just comes programmed with that. I'm just going to initialize again to take me back to my initial preset. Nice and buzzy. So I've got oscillator 1 here. And then I've got a sub oscillator underneath, which just comes in at an octave lower. I'm going to add some multi-drive to the filter, which is going to add a bit of distortion. Just a bit of grit. Okay, and then to get that modulation, we're just going to look at using an LFO. This is a triangle wave LFO. I'm going to send it to the filter. And then it's just, again, really about performance. I think one of the great things about having a hardware synthesizer like this is the ability to do two things at once. You know, a mouse is a fantastic tool for a computer, and I obviously use it a lot. But there's things that you physically can't do with a mouse, like change two parameters at once, unless you have some sort of macro setup, which you can. But it's so quick to be able to reach out and adjust things on the fly. And being able to do that quickly, I find, is just helps with the creative process, because you can make sounds a lot quicker. Always hit record, you know, play around, touch things, and just do anything you want, really, and you'll end up with some unique recordings that you can use in not just the track you're doing now, but you know, throughout some of your other productions. Start building up your own sample banks. It's a really great way of working. Okay, so for the final part of this, we're going to look at the mix. I'm going to start off here with the top end bus. As we said before, all of the top end elements have been sent to a group. And we're going to talk about the processing that's on this group now. So the first off here is an EQ. And what I'm looking to do here is, again, remove any resonancies. You know, early on we looked at the individual EQs that are on individual sounds, and mainly with those I'm looking to not really do that much. I mean, I'm probably looking to remove any low end in them that's going to get rid of in the mix, and any sort of harsh resonancies. Maybe try and do a little bit of tone shaping as well to boost some frequencies, but generally it's about sort of removing harsh frequencies. And once you've done that, once you've then summed all of those elements together, once they join together, they can create more resonances. So it's important for you, really important, in fact, to go back over that and have a listen again. And you can just pick out some little resonant peaks. You can hear there that there's some kind of harsh resonancies in there that I don't want. So I'm just taking, you know, not drastic amount, but just little bits here and there, and that's the key to a good mix. It's about, if you can try, I mean, let's say here that I've got 32 channels in this mix. If I can improve each sound in there by 1 or even 2%. When those are combined, that's making a big difference on my mix. So take that time and that focus to really look at the individual sounds, and then when you're grouping them together, to have another look at them. And if you can improve them and just remove a few little harshnesses or things that might be getting in the way, you're going to drastically improve your mix overall. So after the EQ, we've got a compressor, which is just gluing the drum bus together. It's got a fast attack, it's got a medium fast release, and I'm just looking here for -3, -2, -3 bit reduction there, and just a little bit of makeup gain just to put them back up, and that's just going to slice off some of those peaks and just to add a little bit of glue to your drum groove. After this, I've got another EQ. Now this is my tone shaping, my additive EQ. We started off by removing certain frequencies, and now what I want to do is add some frequencies in. So I want to sort of add some character and some tone to a certain part of the track. So I'm just looking to add a little bit of a boost here, just around the 3K. And you can see that, you can hear how harsh that is, but that's the sort of area that I'm bringing it in, and you can hear the character that it's bringing to it. Obviously that's way too extreme, but you dial it back down. Okay, so again, it's not going too overboard, but now I'm sort of processing all of the elements together. You can really start to put some character into your track and decide, how you want everything to sit. My last piece of processing here is the Devil Lock Deluxe, which is just another great plugin from the Sound Toys crew, and I'm using this to just add some saturation. Okay, so you can really go ahead and destroy your track. It's got a mix. I used to do it on a parallel channel, but you've got the mix control here now, so you can I'm just adding, just again a little bit of an amount there to add some more character to the drum bus. So if we've got, and you can see the difference there with a little bit of processing, how you can sort of bring your drum track to life with a bit of corrective EQing, some compression, some tone shaping, and some saturation. My percussion bus hasn't got any processing on it at all, because the only thing that was going to that was my congas, which we've already covered. My kick bus. Kick bus has got a compressor on it. Again, just shaving off those peaks slightly. Some EQing, so I'm looking at just getting a bit more of a boost here in and around the sort of the subby regions, just to really make that punch and cut through. I'm taking away some of the mid, and really important here is a little bit of a peak here, just around where that transient, that top end of the kick drum is, because you can hear where that snaps in there. And without that, your kick can easily get lost in the mix once you start adding lots of other parts. So that boost there just helps the top end of the kit cut through the other elements, and so you can hear it as well as feel it. And I've also got some saturation going on the kick as well, because I wanted to get that. I wanted to try and get this kick to feel like it was originally part of the drum groove. Obviously with breakbeat, you know, it's often chopped up drum loops from other tracks and samples, so you want that kind of cohesive sound. So I've just got a little bit of saturation going on in there as well. The kick bus is then being sent over here to what I call my low crush, which my bass bus is also going to. So my two bass tracks here are sending to bus 18, and this is my parallel processing. So just sending a little bit of signal from my kick and my bass to the parallel low channel. Some very heavy compression going on there. And then this EQ is chopping off all the top end, so I'm just only getting the real low end signal. And this is just going to be adding some extra weight into the low end. The thing with parallel compression is, I think, especially when you're doing it with the bass in the bottom end, as you can see, my level's very low here. And I'm just going to mix it in so I can feel it. Again, you know, you don't want to overdo it here. You just want to add that little bit of extra weight and low end to your productions. It really cuts through well on the dance floor. Okay, so I think that's about it really. I've got my pads and textures group here. One other thing, I'll just show you some automation. So obviously there's quite a bit of automation going on here. One of the big benefits here for grouping your elements is that you can control them at once. So for instance, I've got my top end group here, and I'm just bringing down the volume of the whole of the group. So fading out your top end into a breakdown, for instance, just comes a lot quicker and a lot easier, rather than having to, you know, individually automate each element. I find it really helps, you know, control my arrangement if I'm able to take groups of channels and quickly bring them in and out at the same time. It's a really quick way of arranging. I'll very quickly touch on my master channel. I'm not a masterer, and I don't attempt to master. I leave that to the professionals. So all I do is I sort of repeat the process that I do on my bus groups. Really, I've got an EQ here, which you can see is rolling off some of the very, very lows. I mean, I'm here coming in at just under 20k, so it's just the inaudible subs and lows that you know just won't cut through and you won't hear anyway. And then I'm taking out, again, we're talking about summing signals together. This is obviously putting everything together. So this is my output channel. All of the sounds, all of the melodies, all of the drums that we've made, we're now putting them together on one channel. So I'm really looking to remove any treble frequencies. I mean, you can hear that, it sounds horrible. So Okay, so these are those really harsh frequencies that you just really want to be careful. You really want to be getting rid of some of them, not to a huge extent. You know, I'm just doing sort of very small cuts here. They're quite narrow bands as well, and you know, by removing these harsher frequencies, I can then sort of go back afterwards and add a few back in, but in the right places. Generally, when you're removing frequencies, I'm going to be doing it with quite a sharp cue, you can see here. So it's quite a sharp, you're getting quite accurate and pinpoint with the frequency that you want to remove. Whereas when you're doing boosts, you can be a little bit more generous and add some wider boosts in. I've just got a compressor on after the Pro Q, and this is just doing a very small amount of compression. As you can see there, it's just sort of tickling the compressor really. Again, just a little bit more glue, putting everything, making sure everything is sitting together. And then the final stage here is my tone shaping additive EQ. I love this EQ from Brainworks because you can treat the mono section and the sides separately. And here my side section here. So I've rolled off some of the low in the sides, and I've just given it a nice little boost here. And on the mono section, I just cover here that you've got a mono maker, which is great because you can set it to a certain frequency and make sure that everything under that is at a is going to be mono, and that's really important. You want your bass and your low ends to be mono. On the solo, on the mono section, I've just got a little bit of a bass shift going on here, so I've got a little boost in the lows, and then it's sort of offsetting that with a small cut here, and then I'm boosting in and around the 2K mark. And if I turn this off, sorry, I had the mono section soloed. Okay, so slightly more transparency and a little bit more character as well for me. And that's only sort of made possible by this first section of EQing. You know, you've got to make sure that you are removing anything that's going to be causing problems. You don't want to be hyping these situations by adding more EQ on top. So get rid of the problem frequencies first, and then look to do your tone shaping. Okay, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed that and you found it useful. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. If you like the track and you want to download it, it is out now on Rebirth Records. You can find it on Beatport or iTunes, Spotify, all the main sort of download sites. And that's it from me. Thanks.